Okay, good morning everybody in YouTube land. Mark Clowan for the Photographer Academy, and today we're kind of following on with our kind of Photoshop school for you. And we're kind of just looking at the kind of the process of what image kind of flow should happen, all right? In our session that we did last week, we kind of looked at the getting going with Bridge, or getting going with to sort out your files and everything else with it. And if you kind of want to maximize your creativity time with Photoshop, you should actually minimize the amount of basic editing that you are doing. Okay, so that's the kind of the fundamental part of photography. Shoot like a film photographer first, so minimize all the edit and so on. Then obviously maximize the creativity, whatever you're going to be doing. So not a creative session today, but a creative session next week. Today we're looking specifically, if we just pop to the screen for a minute, we're kind of just got a shoot that we did for the Academy Live last year, so it should be available for you to watch and kind of see how we shot this. Basically, I've kind of just grabbed one of my drives. This isn't the drive, but when I talk about shoot into the smart drives, these little things that we kind of plug into the laptop, and I shoot to all the time, whatever brand you use and things really, yeah. And what that allows me to do is basically shoot smart, shoot wise, and then basically work wiser as well. So if I'm not working on the laptop, which I hardly ever do, all right, why? Because I want to be having a calibrated screen, and obviously I want to work a little bit more efficiently, as it were. But I want to be able to actually kind of move from the shoot room or the studio to the main computer itself and basically start to actually work. So what I just did there is I copied some files across. Remember, we're live, so questions as we're going along without any trouble. If you're unfamiliar with the Photographer Academy, we're an online training resource for photographers. And basically, we've got over 3,000 films available for you to stream and watch straight away, all based on everything from the keen hobbyist all the way through to the kind of full-on pro. Right, let's come back to the screen a minute, all right? So let's kind of see what we've got. Basically, if you remember the last session, what we did is say that we're looking to create a variety of different folders in Bridge. We need obviously the raw folder as such really. Then we're going to need a JFC, which is the JPEG from camera. Then we're also going to need, in this case I'm going to do 12:9, the guy. And this is going to be JFR. So this is the JPEG from RAW. Now the only reason that I basically want to convert anything to a TIFF or a PSD straight off is when I need it in multi-layers, or I want a lossless file. Remember, a JPEG file is designed to be a lossy file from the beginning. As long as you save into a save around about 10, 11, you're going to find the lossy element very, very little, especially if you're working in full resolution images. By the time you oversave it, and so on, obviously then it starts to actually lose a little bit more of its kind of the information. But in today's technology and today's file size that you work with, just make sure you don't kind of resave it as itself more than probably 7 times. You've got no trouble. But if you are going to work on images kind of a lot and oversave a lot, I definitely have a working file which is probably going to be a PSD, and then if I need a non-lossy file as an output, it's going to be likes of TIFF and so on. Right, let's come back onto the screen. All right, so as we talked about the last time, we've basically got JPEG files here just over on the left-hand side, and we've also got RAW files as well. I'm just going to click on the JPEGs. I'm going to click on one and then Control A to select them, and then I'm just going to right click onto the mouse and I'm going to go to Move To, and then look for the JFC folder I just created. Now that's going to move them straight away to a new destination. As we talked about before, it's separating them away from the raw files. The JPEG that I shoot on camera, as a rule, is just a kind of a backup. So if we cut back to screen, sorry, we lost it there, you'll see that all those JPEG files are now gone. And if we just open up the folders tab on the top, as you can see, I've just got favorites here for now. But if I click on folders, it'll kind of then show itself where it is. So you can see that in the JFC folder, on that folder, that's basically where we just moved everything to. All of the raw files are basically within the actual raw window as such, and it's from here we would start to edit those images down. And if you remember what we did before, I'm basically clicking onto a star rating of some kind to kind of acknowledge it. It's one of an image that I really like. And so I use either the numeric 3, numeric 1, it depends actually what we're doing. Let me just go back to that one. I'm using the left and right arrows to actually select the images. You can see some of the testing images that we were shooting as we were going live as well. But basically what I'm doing is I'm saying, hey, I really like these files. All right, now as a rule, we would basically be running through all of the images, choosing our best photographs, then as we did the last time, going through them again to kind of almost start from scratch, because we only ever want to choose the best of the best of the best and things really. This is where I'm breathing on the lens, by the way, to give us this kind of fogged out effect, yeah? So going through it again. And this is where we're using one gel on the background, one gel on the side of his face from behind the flat, and then another gel light actually onto the black or the white flat, as you can see on the left-hand side, to actually give us this almost kind of flag effect. So again, let's just kind of cup it through there. Some nice images. We haven't edited these at all yet, have we? Because this guy was a paid model when we shot for the Academy, realistically, unless Brandon Superboy on the actual video says, can I have some images? He's already got them, because obviously he saves at source and things really. But again, as far as the look and the feel to the images, obviously it's just really down to you. But you know, you can see what we've done there in pretty much a fraction of a time. We've kind of gone through pretty much about half of those photographs anyway. But let's look at the 3 images that we really, you know, the 3-star images, okay? I just went through it quickly anyway. If you remember, what I would do here now is I want to make a selection from these 3 stars, okay? I want to make them the real choice. So now we would just spend a little bit more time choosing. I'm going to go back to the beginning image again. I like that one. So I'm just increasing its star rating now from the 3-star to the 5-star. And, you know, beauty is always in the eye of the beholder, no matter what. So you do need to actually take your time to actually choose what is your kind of best images, not what you're trying to please others with. Obviously, as far as when you're a pro photographer, you are kind of trying to make sure that the client looks at their best, without a doubt. And you need to make sure that basically you're kind of showing the client the best of the best of the best. But the reality is, don't show them duplicates of the same thing. I mean, that's what we're on about. So the kind of shoot that we're on about here, if this was, you know, a photograph for his 21st, for his mum and dad and everything else with it and things really, I obviously need a huge variety of images, about 48 photographs. But if I'm going to take, what, 300 odd, to choose 48 different images, completely different images, shouldn't be that difficult. And I have promised that we'll kind of be looking at a real shoot from the beginning at some stage as well with it and things really, okay? So here we go. So we've got our kind of 5-star images. So if these were the best of the best, at this stage, all I want to do is Control A to select them all. We want to go into Tools and basically batch rename. And remember how we kind of talked about these in the past. As a rule, I'm just going to go for a 2 digits because I'm only going to select 48 shots anyway. We'd usually be kind of putting in the client's name, Guy, and this would be underscore, he says, trying to hit the underscore, and then I'd actually just put in the actual date. So in this case, it would be 12/09/20. And that would actually give it its unique file name now. Remember, get questions in as we're going through, okay, if you want me to go through anything. And I am not fully flowing through like we did before. Remember, this is just a catch-up, a reminder, yeah, because I want to get through it. So at that stage, you know, we've renamed. The next stage, before we do anything else, we're going to go into Tools, and we're going to go into Replace the Metadata. In this case, we created a new one on the last session, and what it's doing over on the right-hand side here, on the bottom right-hand side, you can see it's filling the IPTC core and everything else with it. So this headline is the guy, and then Guy Poor Portraits in Studio. And then you could actually put in your keywords like man, guy, obviously the guy's name, he says, Guy, studio, color, flag, gel. And you would usually, when you're keywording stuff anyway, you would tend to actually keyword the overall shoot and then actually go into the specifics of a few of them, and basically then actually choose on which ones need to add extra the keywords in. But how long is that? You know, it's basically, well, it's 10 minutes because it says on my watch, all right? But you should be able to go through, you know, if you're shooting an hour with a client, basically you're looking at an hour full process from beginning to end. That's all the edit, all the finish, all the kind of creation of your slideshows, your apps, your kind of your album design, everything else with it and things really. So we're pretty much there. Now remember, at this stage, usually the only photographs, if I'm just going to give them a colored label for a minute, just by adding in a numeric tag. And basically what we've got here is the kind of the 19 images, and those would be the only ones that would be left in the folder. Now, as we touched on before, we want to go through into RAW. So Control R or go into the top left-hand side, and this would be Open in Camera Raw. Now, if you're a Lightroom user, you're going to be familiar with many of the things that's going on in here and things, all right? So it's kind of which one is the best. We discussed that before. I don't care which it is, just as long as you've got some kind of real workflow going on and things really. So let's cut back to the screen. And we can see now we've got all our main kind of images. So whatever is your studio preset, Control A, to select all the images. And if we had a preset, we would come into the little kind of half moons, kind of two circles at the bottom of here, and you would just actually look for your kind of your own. Well, there's none in here, as you can see anyway, so we basically need to definitely create a preset for ourselves. So let's go back into the E, which is the kind of the top of the frame, right hand side, and this is the basics. The first thing that you would do is have a set color balance that is in studio the whole time. I pretty much work with 5600, but obviously as the studio flashes get older, the color might change and so on. As far as the exposure change is concerned, I shouldn't need anything to do with that at all, but I need to cut to this screen all the time now, please, Brandon. So in the color, the contrast now, we're going to be looking at an 8 to a 9. In the blacks, I'm going to be looking at a -8 to a 9. Okay, as far as the contrast and the highlights and everything else is concerned, again, you're obviously going to look and make it look like you want it to look rather than everybody else wants it to look. I don't apply any sharpening as a rule here. If I wanted to add in a studio curve, I could. And then basically, as far as the look and the feel, it's really down to yourself. And if you wanted to add in the likes of a vignette into each of your images, you add into a preset exactly what you want it to be, all right? At this point, if you want to kind of save your preset, the three little kind of dots here, or create a preset with the page, all right? So let's click on the page, and let's go to MC Studio Basics. And then as long as within here, basically we've clicked what we need to click, then we're okay. So just going to press OK. It means that if I was to bring in another photograph at any stage and I want it to have the basics before anything else, then obviously I can just go in straight away. And now if we look into the user presets here, I've got that MC Studio Basics. What does that mean? If I cancel down at the bottom and take us back into the bridge environment, we're kind of back to our kind of contact sheet view on screen. If we then go back into the Control R, so to go into Camera Raw, all I've got to do now once more is Control A to select all those images, come over to my presets, and remember all I need to do now is actually just touch on the MC Studio Basics, and I'm cutting out a lot of the work that is in repetition. So you want to be kind of robotic in a lot of things that you're doing, even robotic with some of the creativity as well within things. Right, so within these photographs, if I wanted to choose images that were going to be in black and white, I would tend to still do the processing of the black and white in Photoshop itself, and that's what we're going to look at today. Okay, so the first things first, why not do it in Bridge? You can do it in Bridge. If I was going to do it in Bridge, what I would do, let's just choose one of these photographs for a minute, okay, and we'll just look at a black and white version of the photograph. We're going to go back into the basic module here, and we're going to go into the HSL. All right, so in the saturation, we want to actually reduce all of these colors down fully to zero, yeah? So that means there is no color within the image. Remember, if you wanted to do a kind of selection of color and just actually keep a certain color within the image because you like color touch or whatever it be, then it's at this stage you can actually use the HSL to actually have the color still remain within the photograph. So in other words, if I wanted the red, you can see here that the red of the actual flat is there. But if we zoom in close, you can also see that there is still some color within the actual lips and so on. If I wanted this effect in just the red, but not on his face, I could use the adjustment brush to go away and actually desaturate the face. Perhaps we'll come back to that now in a minute, all right? But as a rule, when I'm working with black and white in Camera Raw, as it were, I want all the saturation to 0 or -100, and then I'm just going to increase the oranges. So in other words, that is the skin level. So what does that mean? It means that if I was an old school in the darkroom and I'm choosing a multi-grade paper, using the likes of some of the luminance levels, I can change some of the characteristics of the greys and the whites within the photograph before I do anything else. So in the darkroom, in multi-grade printing, we would do part of the exposure for high contrast, let's say, and we do some of the other part of the exposure where it's basically just for kind of a flatter, kind of almost a nil grade. So anything from kind of a grade 0 going through to a grade 5, we could actually change the different exposure times of the actual larger exposure in the paper to the actual lighters, as it were, but we could change the way that reacted with the paper itself and things really. So a lot of the things that I'm doing are basically based on the old school kind of shooting in film and printing in the darkroom as well. So we've got a kind of quite a nice black and white kind of image here without any kind of real work at all with it. And then of course, if I wanted to duplicate this, one of the things that I would make sure again is that we create that preset. So if you remember what we were doing, we just click into presets, yes? Click onto the little page on the top right hand side there on the presets palette. And then we just go into MC Mono 1, Studio Basic, because I'm probably going to have the likes of a difference as far as the, what am I about, Clegorn? I'm going to have a different contrast levels in the different way that I kind of work and things, all right? So it's just, you've got to have multiple versions of the same thing no matter what. So within here, in the kind of the preset group, I definitely want it in user presets. I could rename this without any trouble, okay? But do I want the default? In fact, I really don't. I just want color mixer. At this stage, all I'm really looking for is the hue, the saturation, and the luminance as such, all right? So that is where we kind of just pick on the color mixer element, and that's what it's going to record. If you are unsure, you could actually just untick all of these things kind of going through it, all right? And I know within RAW, we could actually just go in and tick the desaturation, in other words, kind of take all the color out. I mean, there's so many ways to do monochrome, it's really down to you, but I want to take one image into Photoshop for you today and show you my favorite version, of which there's loads of different versions, which I'm sure we'll cover at some stage anyway. But for me here, all I'm interested in color mixer, so it's quicker for me to just go into either the none and then click onto the color mixer, pressing OK, and then pretty much I'm done. So if I just choose another image now and I click onto the Studio Basic Mono again, you can see it's kind of changed it straight away. So we have an instant way for us to be able to pick and choose which images are going to be monochrome, which images are going to be color, and they're all kind of working for us. So again, let's process the files and just remind yourself this process on that one. So we're going to select all of these images, then we're going to click onto the down arrow at the top right hand side of the screen. He says, waiting for Bridge to my life, thank you very much. And we're just going to go then select on the folder, into images, into the guy JFR, press and select, press and save, and you can see that we've basically set all these to the maximum of 10, so on. We talked about on the last kind of sessions anyway. So 19 images should take anywhere between 1 second and 2 seconds each to actually save, okay? So this is not a huge amount of time. That is why I'd always encourage you to work and shoot in RAW and then process the files. Even if you meant you kind of shoot JPEG because of storage issues and so on, look, just shoot RAW to begin with. Work on the drive if that's what you're going to do, okay? Just work on a drive, even though I like to work on a copied version onto the PC first. But then basically edit them, process them, then just keep the JPEGs that you're fully finished and they're done. Remember, if you watched the last session, the JFC folder was copied off site. So it basically is my first level of backup anyway with it. Okay, so if I press in done, sorry, let's come back to screen. Basically, those images are now kind of finished. They've updated themselves and so on. Now, really, if we go into the JFR, we're going to have those 5-star images that we chose. And you can see that some of them are in the black and white and everything else with it and things as well, all right? So these images, what kind of thing would you want to do in the likes of Photoshop? I would probably say this one needs a darker panel on the left-hand side, or it basically changed in some way. It could even be a texture that we add on to the photograph and things really. However, really, if I was going to do any cropping of this image, I would still want to do it in the likes of Photoshop and then save it as another file rather than cropping it in the RAW in case I'm deleting the RAW files. So I don't crop as a rule within the likes of RAW unless I've made a mistake or everything's going to be square and so on. Remember, get questions into us live, okay, because we are live and things ready. Right, I just want to take an image into the likes of Photoshop, and then we'll basically look at its kind of life as far as the process is concerned. Now, you can work in several ways to launch an image within Photoshop itself, just by kind of double clicking onto the image, right clicking it. Okay, so again, open with Photoshop, and that will actually just launch Photoshop if it's not already open, and basically it kind of comes straight in towards the screen itself. So this is the image that we did from RAW. We processed it. We can see at the top it's a JPEG file. We can see that it's an RGB file, and it's 8 bits because you can see the 8 by the side of it as such. Okay, So the 8-bit is just really a smaller kind of rendition of the same file than 16-bit, which will basically double your kind of file size. But at the end of the day, if you're going to be sending images to the likes of a lab, pretty much it's going to have to actually be reduced down to an 8-bit most of the time anyway. So again, if you're really doing any big corrections, the way we're working with 16-bit is more with a PSD or a TIFF file anyway. Right, my favorite black and white basics for you to actually get going with. Okay, let's talk about that. The first thing is make an action of it, because obviously if you like it, you're going to be using it a lot. Right, what are we going to do? We're just going to go into, in fact, let me just Control J to duplicate the layer, so you can see if I just bring the layers across here. We can see that we've got 2 layers now. I don't necessarily need the duplicate layer at this stage, all right, for the basic one. What I'm going to do though is I want to actually go into image, and I'm going to go into adjustments, and I'm going to click onto channel mixer. So once I've clicked on that, the first thing to do is basically click onto monochrome. Right. The next thing is to only use 2 out of the 3 color channels here. All right, so one of them has always got to remain 0. Why am I teaching you this method? It's because we just talked about old school in multi-grade printing. This is what I'm showing you, is you can multi-grade within the image itself, okay, to actually give us the different kind of look. So if I just 0 the ugly channel, that's the blue channel anyway, all right. Now what we've got at the top here is we've got 2 red, we've got the red and we've got the green channel. Between the 2 of them, they need to add up to 100, no matter what, okay? No more, no less, as a rule of thumb in the kind of the basics. So if we kind of click on to 60 now, then basically you can see the contrast there has just changed itself fully. If we just change this to, I don't know, 35, and we go down to the next and we create 65, remember to make 100, you can see now that the image is flatter. So if we know that the red increases the contrast more, we'll be able to actually eventually produce ourselves a series of simple actions. Technically they're presets, yeah, a button you're going to press to tell it to do something. And what it's going to do is basically, if we know we want the higher contrast levels, you might work with a 90-10, an 80-20, a 70-30, a 60-40, and then you might want a slightly lower contrast, and then you could actually work those in reverse. So when I'm talking about those numbers, of course, when I'm talking about 90-10, yeah, these are the kind of the higher the contrast in the mix of what it's doing. On the other hand, we could flip it on its head and actually have a totally a different style of a detail within the image itself, within things really. All right, so what's my favorite? That's really what we've got to go, all right? So my favorite is 78 red, 22 green, 0 blue, all right? And that gives me pretty much what I would be used to in the darkroom of years ago. Okay, so this is MC Fave, yeah, and remember that is 7822. Can you see where I duplicated it now? There is method in my madness at some stage, I promise you, all right? So Control J, let's go to a kind of a 64-40 with it, okay? So MC, this is going to be a 64-40 now. So if you think that you're going to know that if the 60 is red and 40 is green, then you know we can ignore the 00, which is kind of the blue, all right? Obviously, if you're trying to remember a certain 3 digits, 3 different, you know, the red, green, blue channels, then obviously feel free to actually put the 00 by the side. But when I make my action in the default, I would also, by the side of the name of the action, give what the numbers are. Okay, so remember how we did that. Image, adjustments, into the channel mixer, clicking onto monochrome, and in this case, remember what we were going to make was a 60-40-0, yeah? Just going to press OK to that. Let's do another one. and let's go to Control J. Remember, Control J, it duplicates the layer. The last one before we go to questions, image adjustments, into channel mixer, clicking onto it again. So let's go to a 40 and a 60 and a 0. I'm just pressing OK. So obviously in this case I should have given its name MC 4060. Right, so let's have a little look at the difference in these now, okay? So first of all, if my favorite is at the top, what is it doing? So let's kind of just make this just a little bit bigger on screen. Because really what we're looking at is the detail in the actual skin, the skin tone. So remember, if you want to make your image bigger on screen straight away, the control key and the plus key will actually make it kind of bigger for you and things really, all right? So, or minus, and basically that'll take it away, or you can use the brackets and so on. So again, different ways to kind of move it in the kind of the visual. I tend to actually set in the preferences, I tend to actually set my zoom wheel to actually do the zoom in. Rather than moving in and out, my zoom wheel will actually kind of make it bigger and smaller within the image itself. So if this is my favorite image as far as the black and white is concerned, if I see the next one down, which will still give me a higher contrast image, you can see now there's more detail running down the left-hand side of his face there. If I just switch that on and off for a minute, you can see that. Okay, so that's revealing more in the shadow, yeah? And then if we just switch that one off and we look at the 4060, you can see there's a flatness to the grey. So there's less white, and basically there's more of a grey throughout the whole image. So if you compare that to my top image, you can see why I like it. However, you might say, well, in fact, I really like the contrast of the whites here, but I like the actual detail that is coming through on the shadow in one of the other ones, whichever it would be. That's when we can actually start to mask an image, yeah? So in other words, if I just basically create a mask, remember white reveals, black hides. If I just go to B for brush and D for default, that's going to put my white and black as the default colors here. If I press X, it's going to be black on top. If I use my right bracket to make the brush bigger, then all I've got to do here is basically start to hide this left-hand side. So I would not tend to work in 100%. I would work in about 30, 35%. So it starts to actually bring this alive, okay? So what we're doing now is bringing more and more of the image below kind of alive. So if I just press the Shift key and click on the mask, you can see that switches off the mask, and you can see I'm just bringing a little bit of that alive. And that is what I was on about the multi-grade printing. So we can do pretty much similar kind of tasks. If you're old school and you want to actually start to actually bring a little bit of the kind of the digital world into the old school kind of traditions, I promise you, based as an old school photographer, looking at how we actually bring all these lovely details and information back, you can work it in exactly the same way as the darkroom, just a lot quicker. Right, that's enough for today. So that was about the kind of the basics, a reminder of the workflow, and looking at my favorite way to get into black and white photography, especially if you're looking at a multi-grade printing style of black and white image. Brandon, questions? Any?
Yeah, just 2 questions.
Just 2 questions, go.
One was, you were doing the black and whites in the Photoshop. How do you run that through an action to speed it up?
Yeah, so basically if we wanted to create an action, obviously the first thing would be is to make sure your action palette is visible. So then you would go into Windows, click on Actions, and that's, I'll just bring those across into the middle, all right? So you can see that there is some black and white photo actions there already. Can you see? These are not mine for my machine here, okay? These are actually either what they've come with the likes of Photoshop or whoever downstairs this computer was before, and it's still in the right. They gave me a better computer this week than last week, all right? So thanks for that, Brandon. But yeah, so as far as this is concerned, I would definitely want to create a kind of a palette. So in other words, the first thing would be I would tend to actually create a new set. And this would be MC Studio 1. And if you were working it, I would always add the set as working at this point, so I know it's not a fully finished kind of set and so on, especially if I was passing it to any of the other team here and things ready. So let's just go back in and just delete those images on the side. So I want to create my favorite kind of black and white action. That's what we're going to do now. Okay, so again, it's a lot quicker than basically having to do the same process time and time again. So back onto the screen. So what we're going to do now is click onto the little plus next to the folder that we hit, and this is going to be MC Mono 1. And what am I going to do? Remember, 7822. I'm going to add a function key, which is going to be F4. And I'm going to add a color of red. I'm just going to press record. So is that okay? Yes, it is. Okay, so when it comes up with this, it means that Photoshop already has the F4 key as another action. So in other words, this is a hide the shortcut for paste command, all right? I don't want that anyway. So we can see the little red is kind of going now. And remember what I was going to do? If I didn't want to duplicate the layer, I basically want to actually just create the monochrome, all right? If I wanted to create the layer within the action, we would add the action to actually duplicate the layer, all right? So in this case, I'm not going to, I'm just going to make the actual action, as I said with it, okay? So we're recording now image, and we're going into, image adjustments and channel mixer, clicking on monochrome, 78, 22, and to get through the different channels, I'm just pressing the tab key, okay? So that basically moves it down, and just press okay. And once I've done that one, I'm done. So if, for instance, we had a few of these images, let's bring some more in. Open with Photoshop. So it just loads them on screen. Let me just bring the actions just across towards the side. So if I use these three little down stripes here, yeah, we can basically turn it into button mode. And now you can see my button mode, MC Mono 1, yeah, 7822, and the most important part is the F4. If we weren't in that mode, I basically have to select the action and press the play, and then it does the job. Okay, so does it in exactly the same way. If I want to work a little bit quicker, turn these into button mode, let's choose another image, hit the MC Mono 1, and it does it. So I'm just pressing the button. But to really work a lot quicker, I want to use the F key on the top of the keyboard itself, and I can just press here. So in other words, I can basically move through these images just by pressing the F key in here. And by the way, this keyboard needs a clean. Okay, just say it out loud, all right. So F4, that's a really nice shot, that is. F4 again, and you kind of work through it, okay? And then it would be dependent on what else you're kind of doing within the image itself. And that's pretty much it. So that I would create an action is the quickest answer to that one. Anything else there?
Okay, the final question is a bit of a long one.
Final question is a bit of a long one, Brandon saying.
So when you shoot to your laptop, I think this is in a real shoot environment, when you shoot to your laptop, the Capture One.
When I'm shooting to the laptop in Capture One.
Keywording or ratings there and then kind of thing?
Yeah, do I do any keywording or ratings there and then? So you should be familiar that Capture One, when we use it in demonstration, is what we use because it's so fast, it's amazing. So the instant answer to your question, Brandon, is no, I don't do any work on it in Capture One at all. I wait for it to come into the main processor to actually have all the work done here.
And then as a follow-up to that then,
As a follow-up question.
Do you import the catalogue then from your desktop from Capture One?
No, so do I import the catalogue from Capture One? No, you've seen me before. I drag and drop into the folder from it. We saw that the whole process on the last session. I try and take software out of as much as I can as far as file transfer is concerned.
Yep, there we go.
That's just great. Well, I hope you've enjoyed kind of the second step of Photoshop School. We've got a whole year planned for you and things really, but we just thought we'd do kind of one step at a time. So by this time next week, you should be an absolute master of playing around with Channel Mixer, and you should now know your basically workflow as far as the images are concerned. Yes, you should be able to actually get from one place to another within kind of 10 minutes of first edit. And I think the next one, in fact, let's work on a real session and basically take them all through the steps, how we need to actually get it. It's about a 20-minute beginning to end as far as from a real session, the edit, the favorite images, the processing of the files, the renaming obviously before that and so on, and actually then going ready for the likes of getting ready for the app or the video slideshow and so on. So let's look at a real session the next time and we'll go from scratch. Thanks for joining me live. Remember, on the Photographer Academy, you can join us several times a week now, actually live on our YouTube channel here. But of course, we're 24/7 on the Photographer Academy. Join for as little as it's £59 for the year, where you can watch close to 3,000 films, basically being able to actually search in content. And we've got a step-by-step in Photoshop as well. So thanks for joining me live. See you next time. Bye-bye.